Good morning, guys. Thank you very much for being with us. It's James here from the support desk. Again, it's fabulous to have Gavin with us, who's doing number 3 of photo fixes. So without any further ado from me, Gavin, over to you.
Thank you, James. Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me again this morning for another round of Fix My Photo fixes. We're going to go through a whole series of images today that we've got to go through actually quite a mixed bag of different problems, different questions, and hopefully one or two solutions. Now, if you've never seen one of these before, it's really simple. I get the pictures and I do my best, my very best, to try and resolve the problems that us photographers have. Because as much as we would love to believe that nothing ever goes wrong, everything is absolutely perfect, problems happen. And the difference between a great photographer and a good photographer is the great ones overcome those problems one way or another. And that's what I'm trying to help you to do, just overcome life's little hiccups. So that's the plan. And over the next 30 minutes, we've got 4 or 5 different scenarios to run through. We've even got a couple of elements as well as Photoshop. So let's close this image down and actually get started. So first one, we've got a picture here, so let's open this one up. And we're going to start with this one. So this is, we've got this sent in a picture, and it comes with a little message, and the message is actually really quite nice and simple. So this is a good one to start with. A picture of some snowdrops taken in my garden, and the background for this shot was a shed. I don't like the brown. Is there a way where we can change the brown into something more green that would be more fitting with the image? And it goes on to say that they've tried replace color inside of Photoshop with very poor results, which isn't surprising because it's not that good at doing the job. So I've been sent through the raw file, and if you are sending your own images and you're on the image file, then please go and send through the raw files if you've shot them, because it does make my life a little bit easier. There's 2 ways that we could replace the brown in this picture with green, and it depends whether you're shooting in RAW or whether you're editing inside of Photoshop. It's definitely better to do this in RAW. Let me show you how. So I've got my Adobe Camera Raw. By the way, if you're a Lightroom user, it would be exactly the same in Lightroom. If you're an Elements user, then it would be the next way I'm going to show you, because you don't have this particular feature in the Elements version of RAW. It's the HSL stroke grayscale. And on the hue, saturation, and luminance, we're looking for the hue option, because hue allows us to change colors in the picture. But in fact, it allows us to be very specific about what colors we change. So we can affect the reds, the oranges, the yellows, the greens, and so on, and really target it down. So what we're looking at here is a sort of a brown color, but what color is it really? Because brown, if you look through the list, isn't mentioned. It doesn't mention beige anywhere in there, or shed brown. So what we're going to look for is the closest, and I reckon it's a kind of orangey color. So I'm going to use my orange slider here to change the hue value for the oranges in this shot. And I can do it by moving the slider left or right. I go towards the left, everything takes on a sort of a reddy tone, as you can see from the color of the slider. And if I go to the right, everything takes on a sort of a yellowy tone. But here's the kind of the weird thing with grass and greenery. Things we assume are green are actually kind of yellowy. So that's a good place to start. You'll notice I can't make my oranges blue, for example. So this tool does have its limits, to say the least. But as long as you're within the color that it will give you, you can actually change the colors quite well. Now, if you really want to make it green, then we can change the yellows too, because of course the brown in the background was a bit of orange, maybe a bit of yellow, maybe even a little bit of red. But I can just pop some color in there, and there we go. Within a few seconds, we've changed the rather nasty shed brown into a rather more pleasing field of hazy green. And I can show you the difference. We now have a button here in RAW, which actually allows me to do that, which is nice down the bottom, one of the new updates to Photoshop CC. And I can flick between the two, and you can see how we started with the brown, and very quickly we've gone to that nice green. So hopefully that answers the photographer's question, and given the choice, that's how I would do it. But you'll probably be saying, okay, I don't want to do that in RAW, or I only have Elements. How do I do that in Elements? Okay, well, no problem. Let's just open up this image. Well, let's just make a few changes. Before we exit out of RAW, let's just make a couple of changes. Let's see if we can bring back the highlights and just make this a little bit more like a final picture, because it's almost against my nature to leave RAW without having put some clarity in there. There we go. Just make myself happy. Okay, so we'll open up this image into Photoshop. This could be Elements as well, and we'll look at Elements in just a minute. But to change that brown in Photoshop, we're going to use a tool that wasn't the one that the photographer tried. The photographer tried Replace Color, and I've never got on with Replace Color. I find it a particularly awkward tool to use. So instead, I'm going to use Hue and Saturation. Okay, so Hue Saturation brings up my little box here. And on the Hue Saturation, you've probably used this tool before. You know you can shift the hue around, but when you do, you change all of the colors in the picture. And that's not quite the effect. I mean, it's artistic, I suppose, but it's not the effect we wanted to achieve. What we want to do is be a little bit more targeted about what colors we change and what colors we leave alone. And that's where this little option here that says Master comes in. Because when I drop that down, we can target just the reds, just the yellows, just the greens, cyans, blues, and magentas. In fact, this is very, very similar to the same sliders that we were using in RAW just a few minutes ago, but with a couple of slight differences. In fact, there are two colors missing here. There's no purples and there is no orange. You go straight from reds to yellows. So we can't really change the oranges because it isn't there. So here's how you target just the oranges in the picture. Choose the closest color. So let's say red, for example. And then we're going to choose this little eyedropper here. And that eyedropper tool allows me to sample a color by clicking it. So when I click on the color, it'll sample that color. It'll change the name to yellows, except it's not really yellows at all. But have a little look down the bottom where we've got this rainbow. And here you can see the colors it's sampled. There is a dark gray and a light gray area. The dark gray area is the specific tones, and then it sort of feathers out to the other colors. And you can see it's bang on orange. That's a bit of luck. So now when I move my hue, it's going to affect the oranges, and I can change them to any color I want. And in fact, if I did want a blue background, this is the tool that will do it. Okay, and we can come in here and we get a really nice green like that. And of course, we can change the saturation and the brightness just of those orangey tones just to get it absolutely just the way we want it. So two different tools, but both giving a fairly similar look and feel. The one inside of Photoshop has less accuracy on color sampling automatically, but ultimately has a little bit more fine-tuning. But the one inside of RAW just gives a neater, smoother finish. So it's a matter of right tool for the right job. In this case, you can actually get away with either tool, which is kind of lucky and nice. Okay, so there we go. Hope that helps. All the photographers on this are anonymous, of course, so we're not giving names away, unless, of course, you wish us to. That's fine. In which case, hopefully, the photographer, hopefully that answers your problem, and there we go. Your shed is gone. Another little tip, of course, for the photographer is just to paint your shed green. That might work. Okay, so we'll close that down, and we're going to go into a question that's specifically about elements. And this is a question rather than a photograph, so the question came in. Okay, so in Elements, RAW, there is no adjustment brush. And paraphrasing the question somewhat, he's seen or she's seen the videos where we've used the adjustment brush inside of Elements, inside of Photoshop rather, and would like it in Elements. Is there a nice little cheat, workaround, or fix? Yeah, there is. The cheat, workaround, and fix is probably to go and get hold of a copy of Lightroom. Okay, so buy Lightroom. It's relatively inexpensive. It has all of the raw tools of Photoshop, plus a little bit extra as well. But also you can actually then bring things back into Elements to finish off anything you can't do in Lightroom. So Lightroom and Elements, great partnership. However, if you don't want to do that, well, there is a sort of a workaround. So we're going to use one of my images for this one because it was a question rather than a photo. And here we got a picture that I want to fix. And I'm in RAW inside of Elements. And the first thing you notice in RAW is there is a lot less options. For example, that hue saturation option that we used for the snowdrops, it's not there. Okay, so it doesn't exist. There are less tools up the top. There's not even a clone tool here, let alone any adjustment brushes. So what we have is a lot more limited, We do have a few basic tools in here. We have the straighten tool, so I can go and straighten my rather wonky Welsh horizon line. There we go. That's better. And of course we have all of the basic tools, which are the most important ones by far. Okay, so before I go and do my cheat for the adjustment brush, I need to do a basic edit to this picture. Now I know I want this picture to be black and white. That was the shot I had in mind when I took it. So let's just knock out the saturation first of all. And then I'm just going to hit the auto button and just see what happens. Okay, auto's made a complete disaster of that picture, which sometimes it does, sometimes it fixes it. In this case it doesn't. So I'll just click on default and I'll do it myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by editing this picture looking at the sky. So let's see what we can do here. We'll put a bit more contrast in that sky, and we'll put some clarity in there as well. You can see that these tools affect the whole picture, and that's where adjustment brushes come in really handy, because you can be local. We don't have adjustment brushes, we're having to affect the whole picture, and that's fine. Okay, so I'm just looking at this sky and I'm just getting that nice beefy, heavy, really kind of moody feeling sky. Obviously it's gone way too dark on everything else, but we're going to fix that in a second. Once I've got the sky the way I want it, I'm going to click on Open Image, and I'll bring that raw file into Elements. Now what I'm going to do is something called double processing. So I'm going to go back into the raw file, process it a second time, but this time I'll process it for these shadowy dark areas. Now it would be great if you could just do what you do in Photoshop, which is to go to File, open Recently Edited Files, and just choose the top one. But in Elements that doesn't work. In Photoshop it'll let you do that and it'll take you back into RAW, but Elements, it doesn't do that. You have to do some work yourself. So what I'm going to have to do is go to File and duplicate this file. Okay, give it a name if you like, or just give it the default name. And then close down the original. Don't save. Okay, once I've jumped through that little hoop, then I can go back and reopen the same raw file, and it'll actually let me do it. Brilliant. Okay, so because it's a edited file, it remembers what I did. So it's left all of the changes that I've got here. It remembered. So really all I need to do is come to the exposure and say, well, this area in the foreground is really dark, so let's just brighten that up. We'll put an extra stop or so of light down there. You can see I've lost the sky now, but I've got the foreground. So between these two pictures, we've got a good shot. All I need to do is open this one up, and I'll have two versions of the same raw file in Elements. Okay, so we've got the bright version and the dark version. So let's go to Select and All, Edit and Copy. We'll jump over to the other picture, choose Edit and Paste. And of course they fit perfectly on top of each other because they're the same file. So now all I need to do is just to mask or erase the bits of the picture I want from one image and blend it with the other image. Now I like to do layer masking because it's non-destructive. So we'll go to Layer, Mask, and Reveal All. That puts on the layers, look over to the right hand side here, a little white rectangle on my layer, and that's a layer mask. That is my bit where I get my paintbrush, and I make sure my paintbrush is a nice black color, and when I paint I reveal the brighter image below by effectively just cutting a hole in the picture. Okay, but the nice thing about doing masks is if you go wrong you can paint white and undo it. Okay, and we can just put a little bit of brightness just in there like that. Now that's exactly what I would have done with the adjustment brush in Photoshop or in Lightroom, would be just to make it a little bit dark and then sort of dodge it back with the adjustment brush. In Elements it's a little bit more involved, but it still works. Really though, if you're doing this a lot, definitely invest in Lightroom. The amount of money you'll save in time alone will pay for your image file subscription 100 times over. It really, really will. So that's my big tip, is go down the Lightroom route if you do a lot of that kind of work. Okay, so there we go. We've got two answers already, so let's close that down. We're going to stick with Elements for the next one as well, because this one is another problem that's been sent in, and this time we've actually got a multiple image problem. So let me just go and grab all the images and we'll bring them into Elements. Okay, so problem reads as such. Again, I am paraphrasing from our anonymous photographer. Anonymous photographer, seen me do some panoramic work before and had to go inside of Elements on a panorama that they shot at the Olympic Park during the Olympics. Pretty quiet, that's lucky. And the problem is, in Elements, it kept stopping halfway through with a message saying, insufficient memory, can I help? Okay, so yeah, I swear I took this exact picture. Mind you, everybody was standing here taking pictures, but I did a panorama here, but when I did mine, the place was packed with people, so I don't know how you got there early, but there we are. So a multi-image panorama, yeah, I mean, I love doing these things. They are just wonderful things to build inside of your computer and very straightforward to do, but Elements has a little bit of a secret, something that Photoshop, Adobe don't normally shout about. And it's all down to the type of software that it is. Now I'm going to get a little bit geeky here, bear with me for 30 seconds. Elements is what's known as a 32-bit program, where Photoshop is a 64-bit program. The bottom line is, if you have a lot of RAM in your computer, I've got 24 gigabytes of RAM in this machine, then Photoshop can use all of that, no problem. But on an Elements, on a 32-bit bit of software, it can only use a maximum of about 3.5 gigabytes of RAM. So once you start doing some heavy lifting, some real hard work, eventually Elements will run out of RAM and stop working. Now that has been fixed, but only in Elements 12 and only on the Mac version, would you believe? So I'm sure they'll fix it in Elements 13, for maybe they'll call it Elements 14 for all of the versions, but for now this problem persists. So let's go have a look and see what we can do. Okay, so how do we make a panorama? First of all, we're in Elements, so we have to use Enhance, Photo Merge Panorama. Okay, so Photo Merge Panorama, this isn't a tutorial on making panoramas, so I'm going to skip through this fairly quickly. I'm just going to use the cylindrical option. I'll add the open files, and I'll hit OK. So what it'll do is it'll gather together the images, it'll look for the photographer's overlaps and joins, which is what you do when you're making a panorama, and then it'll line them all up like a big jigsaw puzzle and try and blend them together. Now Elements can stop doing this at any point depending on how many pictures are in your panorama, how large your file sizes are. These are actually JPEGs from the original RAW files, so they are full resolution. I think they're about 4,000 pixels on the longest edge, 3,000 on the longest edge. So I'm waiting for it to stop. It will. It'll definitely stop. It did earlier. Oh, you gotta love this. I mentioned this is live. Oh, look at that! It's actually fixed it. But even if it fixed it, and you get to the really heavy lifting, like filling in the edges, that's often when it'll actually. Hooray! My goodness! For a minute there, I thought it was actually going to work. That would be ironic. That's when you get a problem and a message like this: could not fill because there is not enough memory. Yes, there is. There's 24 gigabytes of RAM in this machine. But unfortunately, Elements can't access it. Okay, so what do you do? What's the solution? Well, the solution currently is to make your images a little bit smaller. Okay, they don't have to be massively smaller, just a little bit smaller. So that would mean going to each image, going to Image, Image Resize, and Image Size, and making them a tiny bit smaller. It doesn't have to be enormous, but a little bit will count. And remember, you're stitching together 5 images in this case, so your final picture is going to be pretty vast anyway. The only problem is, once you've done that, it still won't stitch together because you have to save every image, close them down, reopen them, and then go through the stitching process again. Wow, that sounds like hard work. Surely there's an easier way. There is just a tiny little bit easier way of doing it. The secret trick in Elements, go to File, and go to Process Multiple Files. Okay, this is a really handy little thing inside of Elements. It's one of those missed hidden features. It gives you some options on processing multiple images and doing exactly the same thing over and over again. For example, do you want to do it to a whole folder full of images or just the opened images? We'll use the ones on screen. Where do you want them to go when they're done? I've set that up already. You can rename your images on the way out, but most usefully, you can resize your images. Now I'm going to resize the height to 2000 pixels on the height, so that'll make them still reasonably high. That's going to be the height of my panorama in effect. You can also get some quick fixes as well, and you can add a watermark in if that's what you want to do too. So this little tool has a whole bunch of different features, but the only one we're interested in for this tutorial is image size. Okay, press the OK button and it'll go through resize, close them down, and that's it, they're gone. And it'll make a brand new folder with your images in. Here they are. I mean, that was so much quicker than I could actually do it. Open up all the images, and let's do that stitching again. Enhance, photo merge panorama, we'll use cylindrical, we'll add in the files, we'll click OK. Now, because these are a little bit smaller, it should stitch together a little bit quicker, which is good news. And it shouldn't have any error messages. I find about 2,000, 2,500 pixels high tends to be just absolutely fine and tends to stitch together without elements crashing. It does depend a little bit on the number of pictures in your panorama, but there we go. It got to the end. It filled in the edges. Okay, it did the man-made stuff badly, as it always does, but it filled in the sky really well, and that allows me to crop in. And there we go. That's a pretty darn good panorama. Oh, happy days of London 2012. There we are. So hopefully that helps the photographer out. The answer is, unfortunately, to make your images smaller so Elements can do it, or wait and upgrade to the next version of Elements, which hopefully will be a 64-bit version. Right, so let's close those down. In fact, we can close Elements down completely. And we'll jump back into Photoshop. Okay. So this is a one of mine. I always like to throw one of mine in where I can, because I wouldn't want anyone to think that I'm somehow a fantastic photographer and nothing ever goes wrong. That's what you often see if you look at videos on YouTube and on blog posts. You never see any photographers' mistakes, but things do happen, and sometimes they are in my control and I didn't do something right, and sometimes they are a little bit out of my control. This one is a little of both. So this was a shoot that I did last week, and it's for a local musician who was after some really low-key, moody images, and I've got this really nice textured wall in my studio. And this was perfect. We set a little light up over the top, and we really wanted the light in the shot because it kind of added some context to the whole picture. And everything was going really well right up until the point he reminded me that what he needed was a square picture to go on the front of his CD. And although I'd shot some that would be capable of cropping to square, the one he liked, this one, can't be really cropped square, because if I get my crop tool and I get a square one-to-one crop, I can get him in the shot but I lose the light, or I can get the light in the shot and lose his knees. So I'd kind of made myself a little bit of a problem there, but let's see how we can deal with it. Let's not crop the image though. There we go. That's always great. There we are. Okay, so first things first, we'll just go through a basic edit here on the picture. So my edit normally starts with cropping, but in this case I'm not going to because I don't need to. Then I go through my white balance, and having a lovely grey wall means I just get my white balance tool and I can just click and check my white balance is fine, and it is absolutely fine. So I've got some things right. Then we can try the auto white balance, but because this is a low-key image, it's going to absolutely ruin everything, but it does give you a chance to see my lighting setup, which is just one bare flash, just on a boom arm. Okay, so really what I want to do with this picture is pull up clarity, just to add a little bit of clarity into the scene, because it'll bring up all the texture that I spent so long plastering on that wall. Really nice, looks very good. And I want to pull back the colors, because the vibrance just a little bit too strong. I zoom in, but it's done less well for the model's face, for the musician's face. It's just too edgy and too gritty, and I wanted something that's a little bit less nasty. So let's just get the adjustment brush, and in this case, and you know, wait for it, I'm going to reduce clarity. Yes, I know, shock, but sometimes you do have to pull the clarity down, particularly if you put clarity up on the background and you're doing a portrait. You can just paint negative clarity in just to bring back some real skin tones into the shot, like so. Okay, so I'm more or less there. I've got everything right. I reckon I could probably just put a little bit more light on his face as well, just a tiny half stop. So that's my image. We're going to open this up out of RAW, and we'll go into Photoshop. Now I need to do a little bit of tidying up here because my boom arm isn't particularly long, and I've got the legs of the light stand in there. So let's go and fix those. We'll get the spot healing brush, and we'll just very quickly paint over those, which is why I love the spot healing brush. It just makes light work of problems like that. And get the shadow. Oh, of course, light work when you're at home, it works perfectly. When you're doing live presentations, it completely messes things up. That's fine. It's live. These things happen. The boom arm we're going to leave in. I'm just going to touch it slightly up just to tidy things up a bit. Okay, so how do I get a picture that is definitely portrait to become a square without making a mess of things? Right, so first things first, we need a copy of the layer. Go to layer and duplicate the layer, and then we need to crop this so it's square. So I'll get my crop tool. Now I'm not going to crop in. By the way, I've got my preset set to 1:1 square. I'm not going to crop in, I'm going to crop out. Okay, so I know how much room I've got to play with, like that. Okay, so this is the areas we have to fill, these white areas here. I could fill them with just black and just try and blend everything in. I mean, that would kind of work. But I wanted to keep this texture and stretch it from side to side. So to stretch it, we could use free transform. That would work just fine. We can go and stretch this across, and we could stretch that across. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm guessing if I actually did that, my client wouldn't be too happy. It could well be the last shoot we did together, because I've just piled on the pounds in effect, because it's not an intelligent tool. It's a very blunt instrument. So how do we get the stretching but not to stretch our subject? Now there are a couple of ways we could do that, but the quickest and simplest is to use content-aware scale. Content-aware scale is fantastic. It has a little sign at the top. It always reminds me of a gent's toilet sign, that one, which is handy to remember because you've got to remember to switch it on because it protects shapes that are human. And now if I stretch this out, I'll stretch out the background, but I won't stretch my model at all. He stays perfectly proportioned. Now the only problem is it's kind of put him off center. And although that might work, and I might try and convince the client that what he wants is a lot of text down the side, in this case we did want it bang on center, so I just keep going until he becomes more central, like so. Click on the tick, and that will crop that in beautifully. So there we are. We've now got him nicely centered. We've got that lovely stretched background. The last little tip of this webinar, one last one to finish off with, is the light in the top there, which was fairly centered, but because of the content aware, it's sort of left it behind and stretched the boom pole out. So what I need to do is reposition that light. And to reposition the light, I'm going to use content aware move, which is one of the newer features and one that we don't always think of first of all, but it's really handy for jobs just like this. It has two options. There is extend and there is move, so make sure you get the right version of the tool. Loosely draw around the thing you want to move, or extend I suppose. Go back to the beginning, and then just click and drag, and you can reposition it so it's over his head. And when I let go, it'll do a couple of things. It'll blend in the edges and erase around the area that I had originally selected to fill it in with content aware, and it's gone. And it's absolutely perfectly aligned. So there we go. There is my album cover semi-completed, all bar the graphics, and myself out of a rather uncomfortable hole. Wow, there we are. So hopefully that's given you some answers to some of your questions. We've done a couple inside of Photoshop. We've done a couple inside of Elements as well. It's good to mix things up a little bit. Now, if you've got a photo that you'd really like fixing, we're going to do this all over again in 2 weeks' time. All you need to do to get your photo into me is head over to the image file website where you'll find a nice little box to fill in and upload your picture. And James is busy, excitedly hanging on the line, waiting for your pictures to come in. As soon as he gets them, he'll pass them on to me, and maybe we'll use your picture in 2 weeks' time. I don't know if there are any questions.
You know me so well. Holding my breath I am, but yes,
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Gavin. It's great webinar. I've never seen that last tool used before. That's quite staggering, worryingly staggering. Yes,
it's very handy. I wouldn't recommend it for wedding photographers moving guests around, but
no,
but
quite amazing. Yes, I've had a couple of things coming through. First of all, lots of thanks again, as always. Clarity in Lightroom, very high pass in Photoshop to sharpening portraits. Clarity in Lightroom versus high pass in Photoshop to sharpening portraits. Does that mean something to you? As in which tool would be better, Clarity in Lightroom or high pass in Photoshop? I know which one Gavin's going to say. He's going to say Clarity in Lightroom.
Yeah. I lost a little bit of that, James, but I think I got the gist of it. So clarity is different to high pass. They do slightly different things. My overriding thoughts are always the same. Whatever tool it is, if you can do it on the raw file in RAW or in Lightroom, that's the place to do it primarily, because you're working on the original, the best quality. High pass I haven't used for a long time. There are better options for most things than high pass now, particularly with sharpening, for example. Smart Sharpen now is extremely powerful. So it depends on the job in question, but James, you know me too well. Yes, I will generally always choose clarity over everything else.
Anything else, yes.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I hope I've understood the question correctly. If I haven't, then drop me an email and we will try and cover it. Okay, that was perfect. Thank you very much. Are any of these techniques going to be available on the tube after the webinar is completed? Yes, they'll be available as a download through the image file blog, blog.theimagefile.com. If you're on Twitter, then we will actually send you a tweet to say that it's available as soon as it's there. Which version of Photoshop did you use for the range of the musician under the lamp? I.e. the one that we're seeing now.
Yeah, I'm currently using the current version of Photoshop, Photoshop CC, but that was a feature that appeared in, I think it was CS6. Don't quote me on that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was CS6. As one of their launch features. There is a similar thing inside of Elements, and it's called something completely different in Elements, but there is a very, very similar feature in Elements from Elements 11 onwards as well.
Right. Okay, well, hopefully that answers that. Thanks, Gavin. In the panorama fix, how did you know to use cylindrical? Actually, I have to say I thought that as well.
Okay, yeah, that's a really easy one. If your feet haven't moved, you've taken a cylindrical panorama. Okay, so as you're taking your panorama, if your feet are stationary and your camera's turning, you are photographing, you're at the center of a cylinder, if you like, and you're going around in a circle. So almost every single panorama you shoot is cylindrical. If you don't know, when you go up to Photo Merge, and if you're not quite sure, use the auto option and that will decide for you, but you are always shooting a cylindrical, so the answer is to shoot cylindrical. If you're taking sort of a panorama where you're walking along and you're moving through the scene, then you're taking a perspective. If you use auto, sometimes it can accidentally choose perspective and you get this bow tie effect. You'll notice because it stretches out the corners.
Sure.
But the short answer is because they always are.
Okay. Well, hopefully that answers that. Myself and Mike both loved the advice on painting the shed. Thank you very much for that. And memory. Steve said memory. When you were, this came through when you were talking about, in fact, the panorama running out of memory. If you were having that problem, could you montage 2 or 3 images together and then montage another 2 or 3 onto that?
Yeah, that might well work. Again, depending on the size. If you're montaging images that are 10,000 pixels on the longest edge and another 10,000 pixels on the longest edge,
Sure.
it may still run out of RAM. But you might be able to get a little bit larger by doing that approach.
Okay, so
Yeah, give it
is
a
the
try.
pixel dimensions not the number of images that you're merging?
It is a little bit of both. It's just the physical amount of memory that the computer has to use to get the job done, and that is related to the number of calculations it has to do, whether that's pixel dimensions or whether that's number of pictures, and it all gets a bit geeky. The short answer is give it a try.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, I'd like to finish off just by saying, if any of you have images that you want to submit for the next webinar, just send it through to me, customersupport@theimagefile.com, and I will send you all the details of where to email it through. As Gavin was saying, if you have got the RAW, it's much easier to work from the RAW, so send us the RAW file. If you haven't, then obviously the highest res JPEG that you've got. But send it through, customersupport@theimagefile.com, and I'll send you all the details. Gavin, thank you very much. Great webinar again, and nice
My
to have
pleasure.
you with us.
Thank you. Okay, thanks very much. Take care, everybody.
Cheers for now.